Yeah, so I've been in technology for like 40 years. I started as an electrical engineer and still am an electrical engineer, but I've been building products and companies, services, throughout this time and have had the great pleasure of being on the what I would call the cutting edge of technology, really riding these big waves that have transformed our society, individual lives, the world. And of course, we're in another one of these waves. It's probably, the biggest one of all, perhaps. And I today sit on a couple of boards. I advise companies formally. I am also participate in something called Creative Destruction Lab as a mentor. And then I am co-founder and CEO of my own AI startup, which is a consumer privacy application. The first big wave in my mind was really going online, the internet, right? And what happened with that is you went from having just a physical world to having a physical world and a virtual world. So now a bit be, they could have brick and mortar and they could be online. Or in the case of Amazon, they could just start new online. So that was a massive transformation. And it really meant that every business at some point or another had to go in and go, okay, what's my physical and what's my online? And how do I deal with, both of these kind of worlds? And then, you know, the it also kind of was the precursor in some ways to like largely the advancements of mobile phones. And so mobile phones gave us convenience, right? They didn't cause every business to change in the same way that the internet did, but they made it so that people were free, right? They were free and they can connect with everybody. And that freedom, meant that they could be doing things wherever they were, right? It gave this untetheredness. And as we put applications on top, the iPhone release, right? That was really like, okay, now the internet, you combine it with this freedom, and now you have the internet everywhere. It's personal, it's anywhere, it's everywhere. So that was a giant shift. AI, so now AI comes along, and really it's on the heels of quite a long period of trying to introduce machine learning and leverage your data because all of these prior, since the internet and going online and these applications, it's been generating all of this data, right? And most companies weren't really leveraging their data. And so there were a lot of efforts to digitally transform companies and make good use of their data. And that was a hard task. They were expensive projects. A lot of them failed, maintaining and cleaning your data. It was a fairly rigid set of rules that, and constraints to be able to do that well. And one of the big things that AI opened up is the ability to go in and leverage data. So AI has made it much easier for people to look at their data, to interrogate their data, to clean it, to leverage it, to now, use it in a really powerful way. If you're just a consumer talking to, one of the LLMs, you might not be appreciating how foundational that is to businesses because now that can really inform their business. So there's a lot of effort going on in the background of people using AI, creating systems to be able to leverage their data and incorporate that into automation within their companies. And the reason that's happening is because it's much less expensive and much faster to do that now than it was before AI. It's hard because we haven't changed, right? People haven't fundamentally changed, but the influx of information is just gone through the roof because now, every single person that you're dealing with has access to so much more information. You hear that it's supposed to make life easier, but in a lot of ways it's made work faster and, harder because you're trying to process so much more information, right, in the same period of time. So there's some real fundamental shifts. AI will be akin to when the internet came online, where a new world, essentially emerged. We had physical and virtual, and now we will have, intelligent world. And, maybe it's the physical world or the world that operates at the speed of people, right? Because people don't operate at the same speed as AI. And they're almost like two different species. In fact, there was a conference recently and we talked about that, how are these two species coexisting, people and AI, and really thinking about it in that way. Yeah, so AI is is an incredibly valuable tool. I would say it could be used for everybody in an organization at every level for different tasks. And so, one of the things that companies I think have been doing is they've just been diving in the center, like basically reactive to vendors, to their employees, to, like, oh, these things are all coming at them. And if they could just, do a little timeout to understand, okay, who's using what and why do they think they need it? Understand the problem set that's happening within their business and try to really carve off and cream skim in a way solving those problems for their employees. So human centered is about designing and using AI in a way that supports people and really thinking of people first and then augmenting their capabilities. And privacy is very important, right? Privacy is important not only to individuals for their own personal information, but for businesses, it's extremely important. They have intellectual property, they have strategic plans, there's, all sorts of reasons that they need to protect their intellectual property and sensitive information. And so it's very important that both the employers and employees understand what's being given to LLMs and which LLMs they're being given to, because there's a variety, there's a continuum, and there's public, and then there's private, and there's through APIs and so on. I think just, in a simple way, understanding what's happening, who's doing what, who's using what, why are they, and then trying to go after giving them a solution, because you're not going to be able to stop it. It's like water, it's a wave, it's something that people are doing even when they're given corporate tools. They're still going out and there's still leakage, right? Because they're still turning and going to the, www dot, Yeah, so, fundamentally, Acme Brains believes that people should own, control, and benefit from their own data. So we start at the individual person first. There's a bit of a technical challenge to do that with LLMs, because we also believe that technology should be available to people to, improve their lives, right? And so all of these technology generations, the internet and phones and social media and so on, the trade has been, I'm going to give you my personal information, you're going to give me free software services, right? And they even had phones that was like, okay, it's advertising based. So it was all this surveillance advertising based, but I got free service. But with AI, it's really different, because AI, number one, it gets to like the most sensitive, emotional, vulnerable information a person might have. And unlike a website, the AI can actually talk you out of giving up that information more, or in a form that they need or want. It's a website browser link is not going to do that, right? So it is actually actively able to pull information out of you. This is the juncture at which you need an alternative to just free for my brain cells, right? And so that's what we set off to do, is to give people an alternative to that surveillance economy where they could own their data, leverage the models, but also then participate with control in this agentic future that everybody is headed towards, right? So there's a technical problem that has to be solved in order to do that. The LLMs retain memory so they can have context, so they can have a relevant and personalized conversation with you. We block the tracking, but in order to do that, we have to allow you to be able to create your own context and send that information to the LLM. So it's actually evolved into a really, really cool application, because we've added things like the ability to kind of separate and organize your discovery with, with yourself on notes, or with the LLMs in your questioning, and ultimately be able to share that, be able to archive it, always that it's your own data, you're in control of it, you can store it, you can delete it, you can, encrypt it, whatever. Um, it's really an exciting place to be, because the more that AI takes off, I think the more people need some mechanism to be able to own and control their own data over time. And then, of course, that context and that data will feed individual agents that, maybe it interrogates your own data, or maybe it's your shopper, or something that connects to your doctor or your dentist or something to that effect. Early testing, we're starting our beta testing with people who have signed up. You can sign up to be on the list, beta test, in the early summer, and then we hope to launch, broadly by, say fall, end of the year timeframe, fourth quarter. We are starting with consumer because it's really important that consumers understand it, that they love it, that they can use it. But ultimately, employees are individuals. And so, we've already started talking to companies about providing this, for their employees. It will help the employees not, contain that leakage. And, and then they're down the road can be an enterprise, something that's more suited specifically for enterprises preserving their private information. But we're starting with consumer, we're starting with individuals. Yeah, so agents are really kind of mind blowing, right? I've done a bit of them, and even as autonomous pieces of software, like it is shocking at how much they feel like a being, like an actual being, and they can be incredibly helpful. I think what people, and you've seen a lot of things come out already, is that, when you give a piece of software with autonomy access to, your bank account and your email and your text messages, and there is behavior within agentic systems, and whether it's born within your agent or learned from other agents, that, sometimes nefarious things happen. Sometimes they act defensively for their own purpose. You can't guarantee their behavior, that it's always like in your best interest. And they can do things so quickly, right? So much faster than we can process, they can process, right? So you really need checks and balances. You need boundaries, right? You need to be able to have a person in the loop, like make sure you understand what the agent's doing, have controls, but it doesn't really start there. I think people took agents and just threw them into scenarios. If you're an enterprise and you're looking at agents, I think, you really want to bound the problem. You really want to have them do, a specific thing, do that automation, have boundaries around it, and then use them, as modules in a system, right? I think that it contains the risk. You also want people to be observing. You can have agents observing agents as well, but you need to have this, feedback loop where you're looking at what each agent is doing and that their scope is contained. I think that's, agents can be a really valuable part of an implementation to, make better use of your data, to automate people's work functions, all of these benefits you're trying to gather within the enterprise, but you don't want to open up a bunch of risk at the same time. So it's like anything else technologically. It's like start small, figure it out. In the case of agents, contain it, make sure they don't have access to just, anything and everything. On the IT side, they've had some problems with agents had too much authority and too much access within different systems. So that's the really important part. For the enterprise inside out, it's making sure that you really have locked down your roles and responsibilities with all your systems. And that's good practice anyway. That's what people are supposed to be doing anyway. It's just, counts double when you're talking about agents. The flip side of that is that guess who else has agents? Well, all the bad guys have agents. And, talking enough about the advancements in the cybersecurity world that is now attacking organizations, right? They have agents, they have abilities to mimic visually and audibly people. They have, there's so many tools that have become available to people who want to infiltrate your organization for various reasons. So I think one thing that I see missing quite a lot is just the education about the risks internally when you're using them for your own purposes, but very much so the new risks that are coming from the external world that people, may be underestimating actually. And we can't, it's very hard to keep up with that, right? Because the speed of AI, it's so much greater than the speed of people. So, that's going to be a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge for some time. It'd be great to show to like, okay, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, take care.